Me and a few of my friends decided to meet up the other day, and after a few drinks started talking about weird things that happened to us during our high school years. One of them brought up the time I technically died, and it got me thinking about it, so I decided to write down what happened and share it with you guys. I believe it was my junior year that it happened. The exact day is still kinda fuzzy to me. I played football since I was in 4th grade, and it was a no-brainer that I would do it in high school. I wasn't any Tom Brady, but I'll say I was a pretty good center. I remember it was a night game because the stadium lights were on and our running backs were complaining that they couldn't see the ball because of the glare from them. You know that feeling you get when you did something you weren't supposed to do, like when you lie to your parents or break something and try to hide it. That's what I felt like the entire day before the game. Something felt wrong. Even minutes before the game, while the usual music played in the stadium speakers, it still felt wrong. It was near the end of the 4th quarter. The play was called in the huddle. We lined up. Ball snapped and nothing. Everything was dark. I could hear talking and some screaming, but eventually it faded out. I felt like I couldn't move, kinda like how sleep paralysis works. Eventually the darkness I saw slowly disappeared, and my body started to escape its paralyzed state. When I could fully see again, I noticed I wasn't on the field anymore. In fact, I had no idea where I was or how I had gotten there. My brain was racing, trying to figure out what happened. I eventually settled on the obvious answer. I was hit too hard, got a concussion, and then was rushed to the hospital. That's what I thought. I was just in a hospital, but even then it didn't make sense. The room I was in was too dark. There was no medical equipment or even a bed in there with me. I was just laying on the floor. The only thing that pointed towards a hospital was my clothes were replaced with what seemed like a gown. Soon my brain started to conceptualize a new answer. It's funny how the human brain will do everything in its power to make you feel as if all that's happening has an explanation for it. While my brain was working on that, my body decided it was time to start seeing where I was. I slowly got up off the floor and headed towards what seemed like an exit. As I walked, I took notice of everything around me. The walls of the room seemed to be covered in a strange ash-like substance. They also had a heated feel to them, not burning but still hot enough that if held long enough it would leave a mark. The floor seemed to be the same material as the wall, also coated in that ashy layer. The room soon began to turn into a hall. It never seemed to end. I'm pretty sure I walked for hours on end down it. My gown was covered in ash and scuffed. Soon enough, I started to see what looked like light as I neared the end, and a sound started to fill my ears. As I got closer, crackling, like the sound fire makes when it gets too hot. My brain started to put pieces together. It explained why the walls and floor were hot. What my brain couldn't wrap around was what I stared at as I exited the hall. Hell, that's what I would describe it as, and where I believed I was. The sky, if you could call it that, was nothing but smoke and slight rays of orange peeking through. Mountains higher than any I have ever seen painted the backdrop of this nightmarish picture. Creatures of unexplainable nature covered the ground and sky. They all looked like they were in pain. Then I heard the screams. I had been captivated by the almost endless horror I saw that I never heard the screaming. There were billions and billions of people here with me. They all were screaming or crying, each being tortured in a different way. Some burned, some gored, some twisted into shapes I've never seen. I just watched in horror at the scene before me. It wasn't long before I felt something clawing at me. I yelped in pain as I turned my head to see something scratching at my leg. It was like a snake had grown legs, but the skin of it never grew around his newfound limbs. I kicked it away before someone grabbed my arm. My eyes worked up the exposed muscles of the arm, soon meeting the eyes of its owner. He was almost beautiful, a black-eyed man with bronze-like skin. He held my arm, almost to tell me not to fight it. His body was covered in ashes and what looked like whip marks. He spoke, but I couldn't understand him. I wasn't sure what language it was or if it even was a language. He pulled my arm, and begrudgingly I followed, the snake still scratching at my legs. He took me down a long stairway, making sure I could see every kind of torture being applied to the people around me. Boiling, grinding, crushing, gouging. It made me sick, but I could puke. It was like my ability to was taken away. We continued to walk. We crossed herds of creatures as they seemed to eat and mutilate multiple people. I watched as they ripped them open and ate, yet the people never died. They just laid there and accepted their new life. My brain couldn't wrap around what was happening anymore. It started to just say I was dreaming. It was all a dream and I was still concussed, but it all felt too real. The heat, the scratching, the man's hand gripping my arm. I could feel it all. It felt like days had gone by since I woke up in that room. As we walked past the mountains I saw earlier, I noticed they were made entirely of bones. Some human, some not. I stared up to the sky as I watched winged creatures fly through the smoke clouds. Occasionally, they blocked out the orange rays. As they circled overhead, we walked more and more. The snake had stopped scratching, but only cause it had reached the bone of my legs. I felt it all but couldn't yell or cry from the pain of it. I just watched at the muscles and nerves of my calves moved with each step I made. The man suddenly stopped. He turned to look at me and pointed towards a pit. We walked towards, and as I looked down, I finally could feel something in me drop. At the bottom was thousands of people. They were pushed together in the tight hole, some crawling on top of others trying to get free. I watched in horror as the man pointed towards holes lining the walls of the pit. Thick, hot, red liquid pumped out of the holes. It covered the people and filled the pit. I watched as some swam to the top and cried, others being pushed down deeper into the liquid. Eventually the pit drained, and the people went back to fighting and screaming. I slowly moved away from the pit side. As the man looked at me, he spoke again and pointed at the pit. I didn't understand him, but I knew what he wanted. Dead, and that's what it was. This was to be my new home. I just started to pull at my arm, trying to get free. He pulled me closer, and I started to pull more. He stared at me and let go. I don't know why, but he just let go and stared at me, speaking. I ran as fast as I could from him. In the pit, I ran for what felt like days, maybe weeks even. Each time I looked back, it seemed I had only moved a foot away. I just cried and ran. No other thoughts were in my head besides the fact I had to get away. I stopped looking back and just closed my eyes. I could feel thousands of those creatures chasing after me. I could feel their heat running down my neck. I heard their horrid growls and the sound of crackling filling my ears. I just screamed and cried until I screamed as I sat up from a gurney, my body drenched in sweat. The two responders that were with me jumped back and quickly told me to lay down. I tried to fight back, but they told me to calm down and relax. My eyes darted around and looked where I was. I was in an ambulance. I slowly laid back and let them check me. One of them told me what happened. When I snapped the ball, a defender had hit me and knocked me to the ground. My heart had stopped. They were called and saw my coach doing CPR on me. They got me in the ambulance and continued compressions. My heart had stopped for almost 9 minutes, and they were ready to declare me dead until my heart started to beat again. And I came to. I just laid there and started to cry. The doctors could easily explain why my heart stopped. They had thousands of reasons why, but they never could explain the scars on my legs that appeared after I came to. It also wasn't until recently they noticed the significant amount of damage to my lungs, like I had been breathing in smoke for years. I would regularly visit the doctors to have my heart checked, and besides the scars, everything I was told about what happened made sense. But what didn't make sense was what I saw when my heart was stopped. I was in that hellish place for what felt like months. Everything I felt was real. Sometimes I still feel my legs bleeding and look down just to stare at those scars, almost like a reminder that maybe it wasn't my imagination. I told people what I saw, and they all say it was my mind making a placeholder or working to stay alive. While my heart was stopped, I took that idea and ran with it for a long time. But still, sometimes when I'm alone and everything is silent, I feel like I'm still there. The screams of those people, the growls of those beasts, the smell of that smoke, and the crackling of that fire, it's all still there, tormenting me, like they're all crying for me to return, like they're saying that even though I escaped, I must come back, that that's where I belong now. I see those people in that pit, and ever so often, I'll hear those wretched words. I might not understand them, but I know what they are. They push past the sound of fire and screams, calmly saying to me, "Get in."